They walked past $310 million that the government forgot existed, and when officials realized what this elderly couple had found in a door they missed for 40 years, everything changed. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The mountain stood like a sleeping giant above the town of Whispering Ridge, its granite face scarred with decades of snow, wind, and secrets. From certain angles, if you knew where to look, you could still see it, the massive concrete structure jutting from the mountainside like a tumor that refused to heal. Locals called it the facility, though most had forgotten its real name. The government had built it in 1962, back when the Cold War made men paranoid enough to hollow out mountains and fill them with things best left unspoken. For 25 years, it hummed with activity. Scientists, military personnel, engineers. Then, in 1987, without warning or explanation, they shut it down, locked the doors, classified the records, and pretended it never existed. Larkin Castellanos remembered differently. He remembered because he'd helped build it. At 73, Larkin still had the shoulders of a man who'd spent his youth hauling steel and pouring concrete. His hands were thick, scarred, the kind of hands that knew the weight of a wrench and the satisfaction of tightening a bolt until it sang. He'd worked on the facility's original construction crew in 1965, fresh out of engineering school, 22 years old, and convinced he was building something important, something that mattered. Back then, they told him it was a research station. Atmospheric studies, they said. He'd believed them because he was young and because the paychecks were good. His wife, Dorothea, though everyone called her Thea, sat beside him now in their small kitchen, steam rising from her coffee mug. She was 71, silver-haired, with eyes that still sparkled when she laughed, though lately there hadn't been much to laugh about. She'd been a schoolteacher for 38 years, taught 3 generations of Whispering Ridge children how to read, how to think, how to dream. She'd retired 6 years ago, when her knees finally gave out, and the school board decided they couldn't afford to keep the elementary school open anyway. Most of the families had moved away by then. There wasn't much left in Whispering Ridge except memories and people too stubborn or too poor to leave. Larkin and Thea were both. They'd been married 48 years, raised 2 daughters in a house they'd bought for $18,000 in 1976. The mortgage was paid off decades ago, but now there were other bills. Medical bills, mostly. Larkin's heart medication cost $240 a month, even with insurance. Thea's arthritis treatment was another $300. They lived on Social Security and Larkin's small pension from the county, and every month was a careful dance between what they needed and what they could afford. Their youngest daughter, Violet, had 3 kids, twins starting college next year. Larkin and Thea had promised to help with tuition back when they thought they'd have enough saved. But Larkin's pension had been cut twice in the last decade, and their savings had evaporated into medical co-pays and prescription refills, and a new roof they couldn't avoid after the winter of 2023 nearly collapsed the old one. So they lived small, ate simple meals, drove a 2008 Honda Civic with 192,000 miles on it, didn't complain. They'd survived worse. But this morning, Larkin sat at the kitchen table with the local newspaper spread in front of him, and something in his chest tightened. The headline read, "Mountain Facility Demolition Scheduled for March 15th. Safety Concerns Prompt Emergency Removal." Thea noticed his expression. "What is it?" He turned the paper so she could see. "They're tearing it down." She leaned closer, reading over her glasses. "The old research place?" "Yeah." His finger traced the article. "Says it's structurally unsound. Been abandoned too long. They're bringing in crews next month to blast it." Thea sipped her coffee. "Probably for the best. That place always gave me the creeps." Larkin didn't respond. He stared at the grainy photo accompanying the article, the concrete facade half hidden by pine trees, snow clinging to its edges. He'd spent 3 years of his life in that structure. Crawled through ventilation shafts, mapped electrical systems, welded supports that were supposed to last 100 years. It had been good work, honest work, and now they were going to erase it like it never existed. "I want to see it," he said quietly. "One more time, before it's gone." Thea set down her mug. "Larkin, that's trespassing. It's dangerous." "I know. You could get hurt. We could get arrested." "I know." She studied his face, the stubborn set of his jaw she'd known for nearly 5 decades. "Why?" He folded the newspaper carefully, smoothing the creases. "Because I built something there, something real, and I want to remember what that felt like, just once more." Thea sighed. She knew that tone. There was no arguing with it. "When?" "Saturday, if the weather holds. We tell someone where we're going. We'll tell Margaret next door. And we bring phones." "Yes." "And if it looks unsafe, we turn around immediately." "Yes." She reached across the table and took his hand. "You're a stubborn old man." He smiled, the first real smile she'd seen in weeks. "You married me anyway." Saturday arrived cold and clear, the kind of February morning where the sky stretched pale blue above snow-covered peaks. Larkin packed a small backpack, flashlights, water bottles, protein bars, a first aid kit Thea insisted on, and his old blueprint notebook from 1965. He'd kept it all these years, pages yellowed and brittle, filled with his careful sketches of ventilation routes and structural supports. Thea wore her good winter coat, the purple one Violet had given her for Christmas 3 years ago, and her sturdiest boots. She'd packed her own bag, extra batteries, a thermos of coffee, hand warmers, and her phone fully charged. They told Margaret, their neighbor, a woman in her 60s, who still worked at the post office. "We're going up to see the old facility," Larkin said. "Should be back by dinner time." Margaret frowned. "That place is condemned." "We're just looking from the outside," Thea lied smoothly. "Larkin worked on it. Wants to see it before they tear it down." Margaret softened. "Well, be careful. Call if you need anything." The drive up the old access road took 40 minutes. The road hadn't been maintained in over a decade, and Larkin had to navigate around fallen branches and washouts from spring runoff. The Civic's suspension groaned, but it kept going. It always did. As they climbed higher, the forest thickened. Douglas fir and ponderosa pine crowded the roadside, their branches heavy with snow. They passed the old checkpoint station, now just a rotting guard shack with the windows smashed out. Larkin remembered when armed military police stood here, checking IDs, turning away anyone without clearance. And then they saw it. The facility emerged from the mountain face like something from a dystopian dream. Massive, brutalist, concrete, stained with decades of weather and neglect. It was circular, built directly into the granite, with observation windows that stared like dead eyes. 6 levels visible from the outside, but Larkin knew there were at least 4 more carved deep into the mountain itself. Chain-link fence surrounded the perimeter, topped with rusted barbed wire and plastered with no trespassing signs. Danger, structural failure, keep out, property of us government. Larkin parked the Civic on a patch of level ground about 50 yards from the fence. They sat for a moment in silence, the engine ticking as it cooled. "It's bigger than I remembered," Thea whispered. "They built it to last through a nuclear war," Larkin said. "Over-engineered everything. That's why it's still standing." They got out. The air bit cold and sharp, carrying the scent of pine and old concrete. Larkin approached the fence slowly, like you'd approach a sleeping animal. He found the old service entrance exactly where he remembered it, partially hidden behind overgrown scrub oak. Someone had cut the chain link here, probably urban explorers or scavengers. The opening was just big enough to squeeze through. "This is where we stop, right?" Thea asked, though her tone said she already knew the answer. Larkin looked at her. "You can wait in the car. I'll only be 20 minutes." She shook her head. 48 years, Larkin. I'm not starting to let you do stupid things alone now. He kissed her forehead. Then stay close. They slipped through the fence. Inside the perimeter, the world felt different, quieter. The facility loomed above them, and their footsteps crunched too loud against frozen ground. They found the service entrance, a heavy steel door that stood slightly ajar, the lock mechanism broken and rusted. Larkin pulled it open with a metallic shriek that echoed. So much for stealth, Thea muttered. Inside, darkness swallowed them. Larkin clicked on his flashlight, and Thea did the same. The beams cut through the black, illuminating a corridor that stretched ahead like a throat. The walls were institutional grey, covered in graffiti now, spray-painted names, dates, crude drawings, evidence of trespassers who'd come and gone. But underneath the vandalism, Larkin saw the bones of the place he'd helped build. The same floor tiles, the same exposed conduit runs, the same numbered doors. This way, he said, moving forward. They walked slowly, flashlight beams sweeping side to side. The facility groaned around them, metal expanding and contracting, concrete settling. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. Their breath came out in visible puffs. Thea photographed everything with her phone. Doors with broken locks, corridors filled with debris, rooms stripped of equipment. In one office, file cabinets stood open and empty. In another, an old desk remained, its surface covered in pigeon droppings. "You really worked here?" Thea asked. "Not in these offices. I was in the maintenance levels mostly, underground." He paused at an intersection, consulting his mental map. "This way." They descended a stairwell, their footsteps echoing. Level 1, Level 2. The graffiti thinned. Fewer people made it this deep. Level 3. Here, the air grew colder. Their flashlights revealed corridors untouched by vandals, preserved in bureaucratic abandonment. Signs still hung on walls, authorized personnel only. Radiation safety protocols must be observed. No smoking. Larkin moved with purpose now, counting doors. "I helped install the ventilation system down here. Spent 6 months mapping every air shaft, every return duct." He stopped at a door marked Mechanical Access B. "This should be—" The door was locked, but the frame had rotted. Larkin put his shoulder into it, and the door gave way with a crack of splitting wood. Inside was a room filled with old equipment, pumps, valves, electrical panels. Dust coated everything. But Larkin wasn't looking at the equipment. He was looking at the wall. "What is it?" Thea asked. He approached slowly, running his hand along the concrete. "This is wrong." "Wrong how?" "This wall." He knocked on it, hollow. "This shouldn't be here." He pulled out his old blueprint notebook, flipping to a page marked Sub-Level 3. His finger traced lines he'd drawn 58 years ago. "According to my drawings, this room extended another 30 feet. There was a secondary equipment access." He looked up. "There should be a door here." Thea joined him at the wall. "Maybe you're remembering wrong?" "I'm not." His voice was firm. "I drew these plans myself, triple-checked every measurement." He knocked again, listening. This wall was added later, after construction finished. He began examining the surface inch by inch, his flashlight held close. Thea helped, running her hands along the concrete, looking for seams or irregularities. "Here," Thea said. "Feel this." Larkin moved beside her. There was a seam, barely visible, painted over countless times but still there. A vertical line about 7 feet high, then another, 3 feet away, and at the top and bottom, horizontal seams completing a rectangle. "It's a door," Larkin breathed, "a hidden door." They searched for a handle, a latch, anything, nothing, just smooth painted concrete. Then Larkin noticed something. A small panel, the size of a playing card, mounted at chest height. It was the same color as the wall, almost invisible. He pried at it with his pocket knife and it popped open. Inside was a keypad. Ancient technology, the kind with physical buttons, but the small LED display still glowed red. "It still has power," Thea whispered. Larkin stared at the keypad. After all these years. "Do you know the code?" "No. They never gave us access codes. We were just construction crew." They stood in silence. Larkin could hear his own heartbeat. 40 years this door had been here, hidden. 40 years of government officials, demolition inspectors, urban explorers, and nobody had found it, nobody except him. "We should go," Thea said. "This is beyond us." Larkin nodded. She was right. They should leave. Tell someone. Let authorities handle it. But his hand was already moving to the keypad. "What are you doing?" "Trying something." He entered 5 digits. Nothing. The display stayed red. "Larkin." He tried another combination. Still nothing. "Larkin, we need to go. Just one more." His fingers trembled slightly as he entered another sequence. His employee number from 1965, the number he'd punched into time cards for 3 years, the number that was probably erased from every database decades ago. He pressed the last digit. For a moment, nothing. Then the display blinked green. Somewhere behind the wall, hydraulics hissed to life. Pneumatic seals released with a sound like a sharp exhalation. The door, hidden for 40 years, began to slide inward, smooth and silent despite its age. Cold air rushed out, colder than the corridor, carrying a scent of metal and machine oil. Larkin and Thea stood frozen, flashlight beams pointing into the darkness beyond. "Oh my God," Thea whispered. The opening was a corridor, narrow, descending at a slight angle. The walls were different here. Not painted concrete, but brushed steel, still clean, still maintained somehow. Their flashlight beams caught something at the edge of visibility, something that gleamed. Larkin took a step forward. Thea grabbed his arm. "We don't know what's down there." "I know." But he didn't stop. They entered together, side by side, hands clasped. The door remained open behind them, and their footsteps echoed on steel flooring. The corridor ran for maybe 60 feet, then opened into a larger space. Larkin swept his flashlight across the room, and his breath stopped. It was a vault. A massive underground vault. The room was easily 80 feet on each side, with a ceiling 20 feet high. Along the walls, floor-to-ceiling storage units lined up in perfect rows. Industrial shelving held hundreds of sealed containers. Filing cabinets, still locked, stood in organized clusters, and in the center of the room, like an altar, was a massive vault door, circular, the kind you'd see in a bank, with a wheel lock and biometric scanner. But the vault door stood open, not wide, just cracked, like someone had failed to seal it properly, or like time and mechanical failure had left it ajar by just a few inches. "What is this place?" Thea's voice was small, swallowed by the vast space. Larkin approached the nearest storage unit. His flashlight illuminated metal containers, each labeled with codes and dates. He recognized some of the abbreviations from his time at the facility. DOD, classified, emergency reserves. Thea had moved to a filing cabinet. She tried a drawer. Locked, but the next one opened with a metallic scrape. Inside were files, yellowed with age but still intact. She pulled one out carefully, opened it. Her face went pale. "Larkin!" Something in her tone made him turn immediately. "What is it?" She held out the file so he could see. It was a financial document. Ledgers, transaction records, all dated 1979 to 1983. The numbers were staggering. Millions allocated, transferred, stored. Emergency Contingency Fund, the header read. Authorized under Classified Appropriation Act of 1978. Larkin took the file, hands shaking. He flipped through pages. More transactions, more allocations, more money moving into this facility, into this vault, and then nothing. The record stopped abruptly in 1983. No final report, no dispersal documentation, just an ending, as if someone had slammed a book shut mid-sentence. "How much?" Thea asked. Larkin kept reading, his engineering mind calculating, adding, This can't be right." How much, Larkin? He looked at her, and in the flashlight glow, she could see the shock in his eyes. Hundreds of millions, maybe more. They stood in stunned silence. Then slowly, as if drawn by gravity, they both turned toward the massive vault door, the one that stood slightly open, the one they hadn't looked inside yet. Larkin approached it first. The door was 3 feet thick, solid steel, its surface etched with warnings and serial numbers. He placed his hand against it and pushed. The door swung inward with a low groan, perfectly balanced despite its immense weight. Their flashlight beams penetrated the darkness inside, and they saw it, pallets. Dozens of them, stacked neatly, wrapped in industrial plastic. And on each pallet, clearly visible even through the wrapping, were bricks of currency. Bundles of cash, organized by denomination. 1s, 5s, 10s, 20s, 50s, 100s. Some looked old, vintage bills from the 70s and 80s. Others were newer, though still decades old. Along the back wall, wooden crates were stamped with official seals. U.S. Treasury, Federal Reserve, authorized personnel only. Larkin stepped inside the vault, legs trembling. He approached the nearest pallet, knelt down, wiped dust from the plastic wrapping. Through the clear material, he could see bundles of $100 bills, each bundle marked $10,000. He counted the bundles in the visible layer. 50. That was $500,000 in one layer, and the pallet was stacked 5 layers high. "That's $2.5 million, he whispered. "On one pallet." Thea had entered behind him. Her flashlight swept across the room. "Larkin, there are at least 20 pallets in here." He stood slowly, his knees cracking. They walked deeper into the vault, more pallets, and in a corner, something else. Wooden boxes, heavy, marked with hazard symbols. Larkin opened one carefully. Inside, nestled in foam, were gold bars, each one stamped with official U.S. Mint markings. Weight, 400 troy ounces. Date, 1979. "Jesus Christ," Thea breathed. They found more, silver reserves, bearer bonds in sealed envelopes, stock certificates from companies that no longer existed, rare coins in protective cases, everything catalogued, organized, forgotten. On a steel desk near the vault entrance, they found a manifest, a complete inventory, typed on an old typewriter, dated March 3, 1983. The final page had a summary. Total assets secured, $309,742,618. Adjusted for current value and appreciation, exceeds $500 million. Authorization, Classified Congressional Committee, Emergency Appropriations Division. Purpose, Contingency Operations Fund for Undisclosed National Security Initiatives. Status, secured until executive order authorizes dispersal. Larkin sank into the desk chair. The metal creaked under his weight. Thea stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder, staring at the manifest. "They forgot it," she said quietly. "Didn't they? The government just forgot this was here." Larkin nodded. His mind was racing, trying to process. The program probably got classified, buried under layers of secrecy. People who knew about it died or retired. Records got lost in bureaucratic reshuffling, and this place, they sealed it, scheduled it for demolition, and nobody thought to check for hidden vaults. $310 million, Thea whispered, just sitting here, for 40 years. They sat in silence, an elderly couple in worn winter coats, surrounded by a fortune beyond anything they'd ever imagined. The vault hummed quietly around them, climate control systems still functioning after all these years, keeping the air dry, the temperature stable, the money preserved. Thea's phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. "Everything okay?" Thea's hands shook as she typed back, "All fine, headed home soon." Larkin stood, walked back to the entrance of the vault. He looked out at the rows of pallets, the stacked crates, the careful organization of wealth that nobody remembered. "We need to leave," he said. "Now." "Why?" "Because we need to think, really think, about what we just found and what we do with it." They backed out of the vault slowly, as if sudden movement might make it disappear. Larkin pulled the massive door closed, leaving it the same way they'd found it, open, just a crack. They walked through the climate-controlled corridor, back to the hidden door. Larkin looked at the keypad, then back at the darkness behind them. "Close it," Thea asked. He hesitated, then pressed a button marked secure. The hidden door began to slide shut, its hydraulics whispering. It sealed with a soft click, becoming once again an invisible seam in a concrete wall. They stood in the mechanical room, flashlights illuminating floating dust. Larkin's old blueprints were still spread on a broken pump housing where he'd set them. "Did that just happen?" Thea asked. "Or are we both having some kind of altitude-induced hallucination?" Larkin took her hand, squeezed it. It happened. They retraced their steps through the facility, past the abandoned offices, up the stairwells, through the graffiti-covered corridors. The whole way, neither of them spoke. When they emerged into the cold February afternoon, the sunlight felt too bright, too normal. They drove down the mountain in silence. The Civic's engine rattled and the heater blew lukewarm air, and everything was exactly as it had been that morning. Except everything had changed. When they pulled into their driveway, Violet's minivan was parked in front of the house. Through the window, they could see her inside with the kids, probably dropping off something or picking something up. Larkin and Thea sat in the Civic, engine off, staring at their small house with its peeling paint and sagging gutter. "What do we do?" Thea whispered. Larkin's hands gripped the steering wheel. "I don't know. We could take it. All of it. Nobody knows it's there. Nobody's looking for it. It's been 40 years. I know. We could pay off every debt, help Violet with the twins' college, get you better heart treatment, live without worrying about every dollar. I know. But?" Larkin turned to look at her. In the afternoon light, he could see every line on her face, every year they'd spent together. 48 years of choosing each other, of doing right even when it was hard. "But it's not ours," he said quietly. Thea's eyes filled with tears. "It's not anybody's anymore. It's been abandoned. That doesn't make it ours." They sat together, hands clasped, while inside their house, their daughter laughed with their grandchildren, and the sun tracked slowly across the winter sky, and in a mountain vault 40 minutes away, $310 million sat waiting in the dark. They didn't tell Violet. Not that day. She'd stopped by to drop off leftovers from dinner and stayed for coffee, talking about the twins' college applications, about how expensive everything had become, about how she wished she could help her parents more, but money was so tight. Larkin and Thea sat at their kitchen table, nodding and smiling and sipping coffee, while their minds screamed with the weight of what they'd discovered just hours before. After Violet left, they sat in silence until the sun went down. Then Larkin stood, pulled out his old laptop, the one that took 5 minutes to boot up, and opened a browser. "What are you doing?" Thea asked. "Research." He started with the facility itself. Mountain Ridge Research Station, its official name. Opened 1962, officially closed 1987. He found old newspaper articles from the local paper, brief mentions of the closure. Government downsizing, they'd said. Budget cuts. The facility had employed 347 people at its peak. When it closed, the town lost a third of its population within 2 years. He searched for information about classified government programs from the 1970s and 80s, emergency contingency funds, congressional appropriations. He found references, footnotes in academic papers, conspiracy forums that were equal parts truth and paranoia. Thea pulled up a chair beside him. Together they read late into the night. What they found disturbed them. The facility hadn't just been a research station. Documents from declassified reports, Freedom of Information Act requests, whistleblower testimonies from other sites, they all pointed to something darker. Human testing, psychological experiments, studies on the effects of isolation, radiation exposure, pharmaceutical trials conducted without proper consent. "Oh God," Thea whispered, reading a testimony from 1994. "They used people, workers who thought they were signing up for medical studies. They exposed them to chemicals, to radiation. Some of them died." Larkin found more. Families who'd sued the government in the 1990s, cases that were settled quietly, sealed under national security provisions. Victims who'd never received compensation because the programs were classified and you couldn't sue for damages from programs that officially didn't exist. By 2 a.m, they had assembled a picture. The vault money wasn't just emergency funds, it was hush money, compensation that was supposed to be distributed to victims and families. But the program had been classified so deeply, buried under so many layers of secrecy, that when it ended, the money had been forgotten, sealed in a mountain, left to sit. "These people never got what they were owed," Thea said, her voice shaking. "Families lost fathers, mothers, children, and the money that was supposed to make it right just sat there." Larkin closed the laptop. His hands trembled. The simple question of what's ours and what isn't had become infinitely more complicated. "We can't just take it," Thea said. "Not now, not knowing what we know." "No," Larkin agreed. "We can't. But we can't just leave it there either." They went to bed but didn't sleep. Larkin stared at the ceiling, mind racing. Thea lay beside him, her breathing too quick, too shallow. "Around 4 a.m, she whispered. "What if we report it? Call the FBI or something?" "And tell them what? That we broke into a condemned facility and found a classified vault? We didn't break in, the door was open. We went past no trespassing signs. We entered a restricted area. To look, Larkin, not to steal." "You think they'll see it that way? The government loses track of $300 million and suddenly an old couple finds it. They'll think we're trying to steal it. Or they'll classify everything again, seal it back up, and those families still won't get what they're owed." Thea sat up. "So what do we do?" Larkin sat up too. In the darkness of their bedroom, surrounded by 48 years of marriage and memories, they faced an impossible choice. "We document everything," he said finally. "We go back. We photograph every page of that manifest, every file we can find. We build a record that can't be disappeared. And then we figure out who to trust." The next morning, Sunday, they drove back up the mountain. The Civic's engine coughed in the cold, and Larkin wondered how many more trips the old car had left in it. They'd brought better equipment this time. A good digital camera borrowed from Margaret under the pretense of photographing the facility before demolition, extra batteries, a portable hard drive. The hidden door opened with the same code. Larkin's employee number from 1965, still valid after all these years. The hydraulics hissed, and they descended into the vault once more. In daylight streaming from their flashlights and the camera's screen, the money looked even more real. Thea photographed everything methodically, every pallet from multiple angles, the gold bars, the bearer bonds, the stock certificates. She photographed serial numbers, dates, official seals. Larkin worked on the files. He pulled out folders carefully, photographed each page, replaced them exactly as they'd been. Financial records, transaction logs, authorization documents bearing signatures of officials whose names he recognized from history books. Senators, cabinet members, people who were dead now, their secrets buried with them. Except these secrets weren't buried. They were preserved in a climate-controlled vault, waiting. He found something else, a locked drawer in the steel desk. He used his pocket knife to jimmy it open, and inside was a leather-bound journal. Handwritten entries from someone named Martin Reeves, facility director from 1979 to 1983. Larkin read aloud while Thea photographed the pages. March 4, 1983. Received final authorization to seal contingency vault. Total assets secured per directive. Instructed to classify all records level Omega. told explicitly that knowledge of Vault's existence must not extend beyond current command structure. When I asked about dispersal timeline, I was told to await executive order. That was 6 months ago. He flipped ahead. June 17th, 1983. Still no word on contingency fund dispersal. Compensation claims from affected families continue to arrive, but I've been ordered not to acknowledge or process them. This weighs on me. These people deserve justice, but I'm told it's a matter of national security. Further ahead. January 9th, 1984. Received notice of my transfer, effective immediately. No replacement facility director named. Asked about Vault protocols, told not to worry about it. Everything is under control. But I'm not convinced. Too many loose ends, too many families still waiting for compensation they were promised. I'm leaving this journal in the vault. If something happens, if this gets buried and forgotten, maybe someday someone will find it and do the right thing. Larkin's voice cracked on the last words. He looked at Thea, her face was wet with tears. He knew, she whispered. He knew it would be forgotten. They photographed every page of the journal. It was a record of bureaucratic negligence and moral injury. A man trying to do right in a system designed to bury the truth. By noon, they'd documented everything. Over 4,000 photographs. Every relevant file, every transaction record, the complete manifest, the journal. Larkin copied everything to the portable hard drive, then made a second backup. They sat in the vault one more time, surrounded by fortune. What happens next will test everything we believe about right and wrong, reveal the true measure of our character, and change our town forever. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Thea broke the silence. We could still take some, just enough to help Violet, to pay our bills. Who would know? Larkin looked at her. 48 years, and he'd never heard that tone in her voice. Desperation mixed with hope, mixed with shame. We'd know, he said softly. Would that be so bad? We've struggled our whole lives, Larkin. Worked hard, played by the rules, and what do we have? A house that's falling apart and medical bills we can't pay. Is it really stealing if it's been abandoned? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood and walked to the nearest pallet. He ran his hand over the plastic-wrapped bundles. $50,000 per layer, $250,000 per pallet, $5 million in just the nearest stack. You know what scares me? He said. It's not that we could take it, it's that I want to. I've been doing math in my head since yesterday. How much we could take without it being noticed. 30,000, 50,000, enough to disappear into the rest of it. And that terrifies me because I've never thought like that before. Thea joined him. So have I. I've been thinking we could take just 2 bundles. 20,000. Enough to help Violet without changing our lives so much that people would ask questions. They stood together in the vault, 2 elderly people surrounded by more money than their town had seen in 50 years, and felt the weight of temptation pressing down. But we won't, Larkin said. Will we? Thea took a long breath. No, because Martin Reeves trusted someone to do the right thing. And those families, the ones who suffered, they trusted the government to make things right. Everyone who should have helped them failed. We can't fail them too. Larkin kissed her forehead. I love you. I love you too, even when you make us choose the hard way. They left the vault exactly as they'd found it, sealed the hidden door, drove down the mountain as the afternoon sun turned the snow golden. But this time, something was different. A black sedan sat parked on the access road, about half a mile from the facility. As they passed, Larkin glanced over. 2 men inside, both wearing suits, both watching them. Don't look, Larkin muttered. Just keep driving. In the rearview mirror, he watched the sedan pull onto the road behind them. It followed at a distance, maintaining the same speed. Are they following us? Thea asked, trying not to turn around. I think so. Why would anyone be watching the facility? I don't know. The sedan followed them all the way to the highway. When Larkin turned toward town, the sedan turned the opposite direction, but the message was clear. Someone was watching. At home, Larkin backed up the photos to the cloud, to 3 different email accounts, to a thumb drive he gave Margaret to hold without explanation. "Just keep this safe for me," he told her. "Don't lose it." Margaret took it, confused but trusting. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, just being careful." That night, they barely touched dinner. Violet called to check in, and they kept their voices normal, cheerful. "Yes, we saw the facility. Yes, it was interesting. Yes, we're fine." After hanging up, they sat in silence. "We need help," Thea said. "Someone who knows how to handle this. Someone we can trust." "Who?" Merritt Holbrook. He'd been a journalist for the Tribune, the state's major newspaper, for 37 years before retiring 5 years ago. Investigative reporter, Pulitzer nominee. He'd exposed corruption in the state legislature, uncovered environmental disasters companies tried to hide, given voice to people nobody wanted to hear from. He and Larkin had gone to high school together. Hadn't been close friends, but they'd kept in touch. Christmas cards, occasional emails. Merritt lived alone now. His wife had passed 3 years ago, in a small house on the other side of town. "You think he'd help?" Larkin asked. "I think he'd kill for a story like this." They called him that night. "Merritt, it's Larkin Castellanos. I need to talk to you about something, in person. Can't discuss it on the phone." Merritt's voice was curious. "Sounds serious." "It is. Come by tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. They arrived at 7:55. Merritt answered the door in jeans and a flannel shirt, coffee mug in hand, reading glasses perched on his nose. At 71, he was lean and sharp-eyed, the kind of man who noticed everything. "Come in. You both look like you haven't slept." His living room was cluttered with books and old newspapers. They sat on a worn couch while he settled into his recliner. "So what's this about?" Larkin and Thea exchanged glances. Then Larkin pulled out the portable hard drive. "What we're about to tell you is going to sound impossible, but we have proof. Thousands of photographs, documents, a journal, everything." "Okay," Merritt said slowly. "I'm listening." They told him everything. The facility, the hidden door, the vault, the $310 million, the files about human experiments and unpaid compensation. All of it. Merritt listened without interrupting. When they finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Show me," he said finally. Larkin plugged the hard drive into Merritt's laptop. They went through the photos together, the manifest, the journal entries, the financial records, the pallets of cash. Merritt's expression changed from skepticism to shock to something like awe. "Jesus Christ," he breathed. "This is real." "Yes." "You found this 2 days ago." "Saturday. And you haven't told anyone else?" "Just you." Merritt stood, paced to the window. "Do you understand what you have here? This isn't just money. This is evidence of one of the biggest government cover-ups in state history. Human experiments, misappropriated funds, classified programs. This is Pulitzer-level material." "We don't care about prizes," Thea said. "We care about those families, the ones who were hurt and never compensated." Merritt turned to look at her. "You're serious?" "Completely." He studied them both. "You could take that money, all of it, disappear, live like royalty for the rest of your lives. Nobody would ever know." "We'd know," Larkin said. Merritt smiled slowly. "You're better people than me." "Will you help us?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes, but you need to understand what you're asking. Once this goes public, your lives change forever. You'll be famous. You'll be investigated. Powerful people are going to be very angry. There will be lawsuits, congressional hearings, media everywhere, and there's a good chance you won't see a dime of that money." "We don't want it," Thea said. "We want it to go where it was supposed to go 40 years ago." Merritt sat back down. Then we have a lot of work to do. They spent the next 3 days working in secret. Merritt had contacts, retired colleagues, lawyers he trusted, advocacy groups who'd spent decades fighting for victims of government experiments. He made careful calls, sent encrypted emails, built a network of people who could handle this correctly. Larkin and Thea continued their normal routines: grocery shopping, coffee with Margaret, watching television. But they were constantly aware, constantly looking over their shoulders. The black sedan appeared again, parked down the street from their house. Different car this time, dark blue, but same feeling. Men in suits, watching. "They know something," Larkin said, peering through the curtains. "But what? We didn't tell anyone except Merritt." "Maybe they've been watching the facility. Maybe they saw us go in." "But why now? It's been abandoned for decades." Thea had a dark thought. "Demolition is scheduled for March 15th, 2 weeks away. Maybe someone remembered the vault. Maybe they're planning to recover the money quietly before they blow the place up." Larkin's blood went cold, and we just walked into the middle of it. That night, they stayed at Violet's house, told her they were having furnace trouble, needed a place to crash. Violet was happy to have them, set them up in the guest room, and didn't ask too many questions. At 11:30, Larkin's phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. "You need to see this." Then a photo, their house, the front door standing open, lights on inside. Larkin showed Thea. They grabbed their coats. "Where are you going?" Violet asked, seeing them heading for the door. "Just need to check on something. Be right back." They drove to their house, hearts pounding. Margaret met them on her porch, wringing her hands. "I heard a noise around 10. Looked out and saw your door was open. I didn't see anyone leave, but I didn't want to go over alone." "You did right. Thank you." They approached their house carefully. The door was indeed open, swinging slightly in the cold breeze. Larkin pushed it wider. Inside, the house had been searched. Not destroyed, not ransacked, but methodically gone through. Drawers opened, cushions lifted, books pulled from shelves, their bedroom closet emptied, the medicine cabinet opened. But nothing was taken. Television still there. Thea's jewelry box untouched. Laptop still on the kitchen table. Whoever had been here wasn't robbing them. They were looking for something. On the kitchen counter, weighted down with a coffee mug, was a piece of paper. Larkin picked it up with shaking hands. In printed letters, "Forget what you saw. This is your only warning." Thea pressed against him, reading over his shoulder. "They know." "Yes." "What do we do?" Larkin looked around their violated home. 48 years of life together, invaded by strangers. He felt violated, angry, and for the first time truly afraid. But underneath the fear was something else: determination. "We call Merritt," he said, "and we move faster." They spent that night at Violet's, told her there'd been a break-in, but nothing was taken, just vandalism probably. She wanted to call the police, but Larkin convinced her not to. "Probably just kids," he lied. "We'll deal with it tomorrow." In the guest room, unable to sleep, they made a plan. They had to go public soon. Before whoever was watching made another move, before the facility was demolished, before the evidence was destroyed. Merritt called at 6 in the morning. "I've got someone. Grace Yamada, federal prosecutor, Eastern District. She's clean, careful, and she's been investigating classified program abuses for 15 years. She wants to meet." "When?" "Today, noon, but not at my place. They might be watching." They met at a truck stop diner 40 miles outside town. Grace Yamada was in her 50s, sharp-featured, with grey-streaked black hair and eyes that missed nothing. She brought a single briefcase and ordered black coffee. "Show me what you have," she said without preamble. They did. Laptop, photos, everything. She went through them methodically, making notes, asking questions. "Where exactly is this facility? When did you find it? Who else knows? Have you touched anything? Have you taken anything?" "No," Larkin said to the last question. "Not a dollar, not a single item." Grace studied him. "Why not?" "Because it's not ours." She smiled faintly. You'd be amazed how rare that answer is. She closed the laptop and leaned back. Here's what I can do. I can open an official investigation, freeze the site, prevent demolition, secure the vault. But once I do that, it becomes federal property. There will be claims from multiple parties. The government will argue sovereign immunity. Victims' families will file suit. It could take years to sort out. But those families will finally get a chance at justice? Thea asked. Yes. Then do it. Grace pulled out a document. I need your statement. Everything you saw, everything you did, under oath. You'll be witnesses, possibly for years. There will be media, pressure, threats. Larkin and Thea looked at each other. 48 years of marriage. They didn't need words. We understand, Larkin said. Where do we sign? They signed affidavits, gave official statements, handed over all the photographic evidence. Grace made calls, and within hours, federal marshals were dispatched to secure the facility. Go home, Grace told them. Stay there. Don't talk to anyone. I'll have agents posted outside your house for protection. When will this go public? Merritt asked. As soon as the site is secured, tomorrow probably, and then all hell breaks loose. They drove home in silence. The black sedan was gone from their street, replaced by an unmarked car with 2 federal agents inside. One of them nodded to Larkin as they pulled into the driveway. Inside, they cleaned up the mess from the break-in, put everything back, made the house feel like theirs again. That night, they sat on the couch together, television off, just holding hands in the quiet. We did the right thing, Thea said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Are you scared? Terrified. Me too. But underneath the fear was something else. Something they hadn't felt in years. Purpose. They'd spent so long just surviving, just getting by, that they'd forgotten what it felt like to matter. To be part of something bigger than themselves. Tomorrow, the world would know what they'd found. Tomorrow, their quiet life would end and something else would begin. But tonight, they sat together in the house they'd shared for 48 years, knowing that when morning came, they'd face it the same way they'd faced everything, together. The call came at 5:47 in the morning. Larkin's phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling him from a restless half-sleep. Grace Yamada's voice was crisp, alert, like she'd been awake for hours. It's done. We've secured the site. Federal marshals have the vault under guard. I'm holding a press conference at 9. You need to be there. Larkin sat up, careful not to wake Thea. We have to be there? It'll look better if you are. Shows you have nothing to hide. Besides, people need to see you. An elderly couple who found something extraordinary and did the right thing. That narrative matters. We're not heroes. Tell that to the families who've been waiting 40 years for justice. Be at the federal building by 8:30. And Larkin, wear something nice. Cameras will be everywhere. She hung up. Larkin sat in the darkness, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. Beside him, Thea stirred. Who was that? Grace, it's happening. Press conference in 3 hours. Thea sat up. Oh God, she wants us there. I don't have anything to wear to a press conference. Larkin smiled despite his nerves. You look beautiful in everything. Liar. But she squeezed his hand. They dressed carefully. Larkin in his one good suit, bought for their daughter's wedding 12 years ago and worn maybe 3 times since. Thea in a navy dress she'd found at Goodwill, paired with a cardigan she'd knitted herself. They looked at themselves in the mirror, 2 elderly people who'd lived simply and quietly for nearly 5 decades, now about to step into a spotlight neither of them wanted. We can still back out, Thea said. Tell Grace we changed our minds. Do you want to? She was quiet for a long moment. No, those families deserve to know. But I'm scared, Larkin. What if we're not strong enough for what comes next? He took her hand. Then we'll figure it out together, like we always do. The federal building in the city was an hour's drive. They arrived at 8:23 to find the parking lot already packed with news vans, their satellite dishes reaching toward the overcast sky. Reporters clustered near the entrance, cameras ready, notepads open. Grace met them at a side door, ushering them quickly inside. "Good, you're here. Listen, this is going to be intense. I'll make the announcement, lay out the basic facts, then I'll introduce you. You don't have to say much. Just confirm you found the vault, that you reported it immediately, and that you hope it leads to justice for affected families." "That's it?" Larkin asked. "That's it. Keep it simple. The story speaks for itself." They were led to a conference room filled with officials, federal marshals, DOJ attorneys, a woman from the Treasury Department. Everyone looked serious, focused. Larkin and Thea sat in the back, trying to be invisible. At 9 o'clock exactly, they were led to a podium in a large room packed with media. Cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted questions that hadn't been asked yet. Grace stepped to the microphone, and the room fell silent. "Good morning. I'm Grace Yamada, federal prosecutor for the Eastern District. Yesterday, based on credible evidence brought to our attention by private citizens, federal marshals secured a classified vault located within the former Mountain Ridge Research Facility. Initial inventory confirms the vault contains approximately $310 million in cash, gold, and other assets, along with extensive documentation regarding classified government programs from the 1970s and 80s. The room erupted, reporters shouting, cameras flashing. Grace waited for quiet. "The vault appears to have been sealed in 1983 and subsequently forgotten due to classification protocols and administrative failures. Documents recovered indicate the funds were designated for compensation to victims of unethical human experimentation programs. These victims were never compensated. We are launching a full investigation to identify all affected individuals and families, and to ensure these funds reach their intended recipients." More questions, more chaos. Grace raised her hand. "I want to introduce the two people whose integrity made this possible. Larkin and Dorothea Castellanos are lifelong residents of Whispering Ridge. They discovered the vault while visiting the facility before its scheduled demolition. Despite having exclusive access to a fortune, they took nothing. Instead, they documented everything and reported it immediately to authorities. Their actions represent the best of American character." She stepped back, gesturing to Larkin and Thea. They stood awkwardly, unprepared for the applause that filled the room. Cameras pressed closer. Reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Castellanos, why didn't you take the money?" "What made you decide to report it? Did you know what you'd found? How does it feel to walk away from $300 million? Grace returned to the microphone. "They'll make a brief statement. That's all for now." Larkin stepped forward, throat dry. The microphone seemed impossibly tall. He adjusted it down to his height, and the screech of feedback made him wince. My name is Larkin Castellanos. This is my wife, Thea. We've been married 48 years. We found the vault by accident. I worked on the facility's construction in 1965, and I remembered there should be a room that wasn't there anymore. We were curious, that's all." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "When we saw what was inside, we were shocked. But then we learned about the families who'd been hurt, who'd been waiting for justice, and we knew we couldn't take something that belonged to them. We're not heroes. We just did what felt right." Thea stepped closer to the microphone. Her voice shook slightly. "Those families suffered. They lost people they loved. They deserve to finally get what they were promised. We hope this helps bring them some peace." They stepped back. Grace returned to the podium. "That's all for now. We'll provide updates as the investigation progresses." The questions continued, but Grace was already guiding Larkin and Thea toward a back exit. They emerged into a hallway, and Larkin realized his hands were shaking. "You did great," Grace said. "Both of you." "When can we go home?" Thea asked. "Soon. But understand, your lives just changed. By tonight, your faces will be on every news channel in the country. People will want interviews. Your phone will ring constantly. You need to be prepared. They weren't prepared, not even close. By noon, their story was the lead on every major network. Elderly couple discovers forgotten government fortune, chooses justice over wealth. By 3 o'clock, it had gone viral. Reddit threads dissecting every detail. Twitter debates about their decision. Facebook posts calling them heroes or fools, depending on who was posting. By evening, when they finally made it home, there were news vans parked on their quiet street, reporters on their lawn, neighbors standing on porches watching the spectacle. The federal agents cleared a path. Larkin and Thea hurried inside, shutting the door on the chaos. Through the window, they watched cameras pointed at their house like weapons. "This is insane," Thea whispered. Larkin's phone rang. Unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Different number. Then Thea's phone. Then the landline they barely used. They unplugged everything except their cells, which they turned off. In the sudden silence, they sat on their couch, holding hands, trying to process. A knock at the door. Larkin peered through the peephole. Violet, looking worried and confused. He let her in quickly. She hugged them both. "What the hell is going on? You're all over the news. Reporters called me at work. Mom, Dad, you found $300 million. They sat her down, told her everything. The facility, the vault, the decision to report it, all of it. Violet listened, eyes growing wider. "You could have taken it," she said finally. "You could have helped us with college, with everything." "We know," Thea said. "But it wasn't ours, sweetheart." Violet was quiet for a long moment. Then she started crying. "I'm so proud of you, and so scared for you." "Why scared?" "Because people who do the right thing against powerful interests, they get hurt. You're threatening something big. Someone's going to fight back." She was right. The first threat came that night. An email to Larkin's old address, the one he used for online shopping. No sender name. The subject line read, "Big mistake." The message was brief. You had a chance to walk away rich. Instead, you chose to be famous and broke. Hope it was worth it. Accidents happen to people who can't mind their business. Larkin showed Thea. She went pale. "We need to tell Grace." They did. She assigned additional security. But the threats continued. Anonymous calls, letters with no return address. One particularly disturbing package contained photos of their house, their car, Violet's workplace. The message was clear. "We know where you are. We can reach you." The federal agents increased patrols, but Larkin and Thea couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made them jump. Every car that drove past felt threatening. Then the pressure got more sophisticated. A lawyer showed up at their door. Tall, expensive suit, leather briefcase. He handed them his card through the crack in the door. Bradford and Associates, based in Washington, D.C. "I represent certain parties with interests in the Mountain Ridge matter. My clients would like to offer you a settlement. $1 million each to sign a non-disclosure agreement and refrain from further public comment." "We're not interested," Larkin said. $2 million each, cash, tax-free. You could live comfortably, help your family. All you have to do is stop talking to the media." "No." The lawyer's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. My clients have extensive resources and limited patience. Think about your family, Mr. Castellanos." "Get off my property." The lawyer left, but the message lingered. Someone with money and power wanted them silent. Merritt came by that evening, slipping past the media crowd with practiced ease. He'd been a reporter for decades and knew how to avoid cameras. "You're causing quite a stir," he said, settling into their kitchen with coffee. "We didn't mean to," Thea said. "That's what makes it powerful. People see you as genuine." He pulled out his laptop. "But I've been digging. The entities that want this buried, they're not just government bureaucrats covering their asses. There's money involved, big money." "What do you mean?" "The facility didn't just conduct experiments. It was funded by defense contractors who were developing classified technologies. Some of those companies are still around, worth billions now. If documentation in that vault proves they knowingly harmed test subjects, they're facing massive liability. We're talking about potentially hundreds of billions in lawsuits. Larkin felt his stomach drop. So we're not just fighting government cover-ups. You're fighting corporate America, and they play dirty. Over the next week, the attacks intensified. Not physical, but systematic. A story appeared in a tabloid claiming Larkin and Thea had actually taken money from the vault and were hiding it. No evidence, pure fabrication, but enough to plant doubt. Then someone leaked their financial records, showed how much debt they carried, medical bills, the mortgage they'd paid off. Suddenly, people were saying they'd reported the vault only because they couldn't figure out how to steal it quietly. Thea cried, reading the comments online. "They're making us look like liars." "We know the truth," Larkin said, but even he felt the weight of public opinion shifting. Grace called an emergency meeting. "We need to counter this. I want to hold a town hall in Whispering Ridge. Let people who know you vouch for your character. Show that you're real people, not opportunists." "Will it help?" Thea asked. "It might, or it might make things worse, but doing nothing guarantees they control the narrative." They agreed. The town hall was scheduled for the following Saturday at the old community center. The building could hold maybe 200 people. Over 500 showed up. The media came, of course, but so did neighbors. People Larkin and Thea had known for decades. Former students of Thea's, now adults with children of their own, workers who'd been at the facility before it closed, and surprisingly victims, families who'd suffered. Grace moderated. She started by laying out the facts. What had been found, what it meant, what the investigation had uncovered so far. Then she opened the floor. A woman in her 60s stood. Her hands shook as she held the microphone. "My father worked at that facility in 1974. They told him it was a medical study, paid him extra. He came home sick, confused. By 1977, he couldn't remember our names. He died in 1982. He was 49 years old. The government said it wasn't their fault, said we couldn't prove anything. My mother spent the rest of her life fighting for recognition. She died 10 years ago, still waiting. So to the people saying Mr. and Mrs. Castellanos should have taken that money, I say this. That money was meant for families like mine, and they gave us a chance at finally getting justice. They're heroes." Applause filled the room. Larkin felt tears on his face. Another person stood. A man in his 70s. "I'm Richard Morse. I worked security at the facility from 1968 to 1971. I saw things they told us never to talk about. People going into labs and not coming out the same, or not coming out at all. I kept quiet because I was scared, because I had a family to feed. I've lived with that guilt for 50 years. What Larkin and Thea did, choosing truth over money, that's courage, real courage. And I'm grateful." More applause, more stories. One after another, people stood and shared. Family members lost, lives destroyed, promises broken. Then someone from the back stood, a younger man, maybe 30. "I don't have a story like theirs, but I grew up in Whispering Ridge. I left because there was nothing here, no jobs, no future. But what's happening now, it's putting us on the map. People are noticing us, and maybe, just maybe, good can come from this. Not just justice for victims, but hope for this town." The room shifted. What had started as a defense of Larkin and Thea's character became something bigger. A discussion about what the money could mean. Not just for victims, but for the community that had suffered when the facility closed. The mayor stood. Estelle Barrett, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd been elected 3 years ago on a platform of economic revival. "I've been in discussions with federal officials. If restitution is made to victims and families, there may be remaining funds. There's a legal argument that Whispering Ridge, as the community most affected by the facility's operations and closure, has a claim to economic damages. We could potentially see investment in infrastructure, education, healthcare. This town has been dying for 30 years. Maybe this is our chance to live again." Murmurs of hope rippled through the crowd, but they were interrupted by a voice from the side door. "That money belongs to the federal government. Any other claim is theft." Everyone turned. A man in his 50s, grey suit, federal ID badge, stood with two others behind him. "I'm Assistant Director Coleman from the Office of Management and Budget. The vault and its contents are classified federal property. All discussions of distribution are premature and legally questionable." Grace stood. The vault was abandoned for 40 years. During that time, victims went uncompensated despite legal obligations. You don't have clean hands here. Nevertheless, the law is clear. We'll see you in court. He turned to leave, then paused, looking directly at Larkin and Thea. "You two should have left well enough alone. You've opened a box you can't close." He left. The room fell silent. Then Estelle spoke again. "Well, I guess that means we fight." The applause this time was different. Not just support, but solidarity. After the town hall, Larkin and Thea were approached by dozens of people. Some thanked them. Others shared contact information, offered help. Former facility workers handed over documents they'd kept hidden for decades. Photos, memos, personal journals. "We were too scared to come forward before," one elderly woman said. "But you gave us courage." A coalition formed that night. Victims' families, town leaders, advocacy groups, lawyers working pro bono. They called themselves the Mountain Ridge Justice Initiative. Their goal was simple: ensure the vault's contents went to those who deserved it. But the opposition mobilized too. Within days, 3 major defense contractors filed suit, claiming the vault contained proprietary research materials and trade secrets that belonged to them. Their legal teams argued that any documents revealing their involvement in facility programs were protected intellectual property. Simultaneously, the federal government filed a motion to seal all vault contents under national security provisions. They claimed releasing information would compromise ongoing classified programs and damage diplomatic relations, and mysteriously, several key documents disappeared from the evidence chain. Files that Grace had personally catalogued were suddenly missing from federal storage. "Someone's tampering with evidence," she told Larkin and Thea during a private meeting. "I have copies, but it shows how desperate they are." "What do we do?" Thea asked. "We go public with everything, before they can bury it." Merritt had been working on a comprehensive exposé, 10,000 words documenting everything: the vault's discovery, the facility's history, victim testimonies, the corporate connections, the government cover-up. It was scheduled to run in major newspapers nationwide. The night before publication, Merritt's house was broken into, his laptop stolen, his file cabinets ransacked. But Merritt had been a reporter for 37 years. He'd hidden copies everywhere. The story ran as planned. "Forgotten Vault exposes decades of government abuse and corporate complicity," the headline read. The article was devastating. It named names, showed documents, included testimony from victims, connected dots between facility programs and current corporate boards. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded. Congressional representatives demanded investigations. Advocacy groups held rallies. The story dominated news cycles for days. But there was backlash too. Coordinated campaigns flooded social media with counter-narratives. Bots spread misinformation. Paid commentators questioned Larkin and Thea's motives. Thea stopped reading the comments. "I can't anymore. People who've never met us think they know everything about us." Violet came by daily now, helping screen calls and emails. The twins visited, providing distraction with stories about college applications and prom plans. "You're like celebrities," one of them said. "Everyone at school talks about you." "Infamous is more like it," Larkin muttered. "No, Grandpa. Everyone thinks you're awesome. You found millions of dollars and gave it away. That's like the most epic thing ever. We didn't give it away, we just didn't steal it. Same thing to our generation. Maybe it was. Maybe the simple act of not taking what wasn't theirs had become radical in a world that encouraged grabbing whatever you could. 3 weeks after the story broke, Grace called with news. We've identified over 200 potential victims or family members. We're setting up a compensation fund. The process will take time, probably years, but it's happening. What about the corporate lawsuits? Larkin asked. Still pending, but we have leverage now. Public opinion is on our side. They're facing massive PR disasters. Some are considering settlements. And the government? Grace hesitated. They're fighting hard, but there's been a development. 3 senators have introduced legislation specifically addressing abandoned classified programs and victim compensation. It's getting attention. People are angry. They want accountability. That night, Larkin and Thea sat on their porch, watching the sun set behind the mountain that held so many secrets. The media vans were still there, but fewer now. The story had evolved beyond them. "Do you regret it?" Thea asked. "Finding the vault?" Larkin thought about it. Their peaceful life was gone. They lived under constant security, their privacy destroyed, every decision questioned, death threats in their mailbox, lawyers calling at all hours. But he thought about the woman at the town hall who'd cried talking about her father, about Richard Morse finally able to speak his truth, about the possibility of justice after 40 years. "No," he said, "I don't regret it." "Me neither, even though I'm terrified most days." "Me too." They held hands as darkness fell. Inside, their phones were charging, ready for another day of chaos. Outside, a federal agent sat in an unmarked car, keeping watch. Their quiet life was over. But maybe, just maybe, they'd helped start something that mattered, something bigger than themselves. And when Larkin kissed Thea goodnight that evening, when they lay in their bed listening to the house settle around them, they knew they'd face whatever came next, the same way they'd faced everything for 48 years, together. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Grace called at 7:30. "Turn on Channel 6, now!" They did. A special report was airing. A journalist had uncovered classified documents showing the vault wasn't just about compensation. It was contingency funding for a program called Operation Cleanroom. The program's purpose: eliminate evidence of illegal experiments, pay off victims who complained, silence whistleblowers, make problems disappear. The money in that vault, the reporter explained, wasn't set aside to help victims. It was a slush fund to hide crimes. When the programs were classified and buried, the money got buried with it. But the intent was never justice. It was cover-up. Larkin felt sick. "It's even worse than we thought." "Yes," Grace said over the phone. "But this helps our case, proves the government never intended to compensate anyone, strengthens the argument that victims deserve every dollar." More revelations followed. Documents showed facility directors knew the experiments were harmful, knew subjects were suffering, but continued anyway because the research was deemed vital to national security. One memo, dated 1981, was particularly damning. "Acceptable losses in pursuit of strategic advantage. Compensation fund established as insurance should programs become public. Recommend aggressive classification to prevent disclosure." Public outrage intensified. Protests at federal buildings, demands for congressional hearings. Victims' families filed a class action lawsuit with hundreds of plaintiffs. And slowly, grudgingly, the powerful entities that wanted this buried began to realize they couldn't win. 2 months after the vault's discovery, the first settlement was reached. One of the defense contractors agreed to pay $85 million to victims and families in exchange for no admission of wrongdoing. It was a legal maneuver, but it was progress. Other companies followed. The federal government, facing mounting pressure and damning headlines, agreed to an unprecedented victim compensation program funded by the vault's contents. But the negotiations were complex. How to distribute $310 million among hundreds of victims, how to verify claims, how to determine damages. Larkin and Thea watched from the sidelines now. Their role in the story had been crucial, but the work of justice belonged to others now. Whispering Ridge, meanwhile, was transforming. The national attention brought tourists, researchers, journalists. People wanted to see where it happened. The town that stood up. The couple who chose right over rich. Businesses that had closed reopened. Young people who'd left began returning. There was talk of converting the facility into a memorial and museum, a place to remember what happened and ensure it never happened again. Estelle, the mayor, approached Larkin and Thea one afternoon. The town council voted, "We want to name the memorial after you two, the Castellanos Center for Truth and Accountability." "Absolutely not," Larkin said immediately. "We didn't do this for recognition," Thea added. "We know. That's exactly why it should be your name. You remind people that ordinary citizens can stand up to power and win. We need that reminder." They eventually compromised. The facility would become the Mountain Ridge Memorial and Education Center, but a small plaque would acknowledge their role. 6 months after finding the vault, the first compensation checks went out. Families who'd waited 43 years finally received acknowledgement and financial restitution. The amounts varied based on harm suffered, but every victim or family member got something. Larkin and Thea attended the ceremony, watched elderly people cry with relief, saw adult children receive compensation on behalf of parents who'd died waiting. Afterward, a woman approached them. She was in her 50s, hair grey, eyes red from crying. "My mother was subject 14 in the program documents. She volunteered for what she thought was a medical study in 1976. They exposed her to chemical agents. She got cancer, died in 1993. My whole life nobody believed us. Nobody would listen." She took Thea's hands. "Thank you for listening, for believing we mattered." Thea embraced her, both of them crying. That evening, driving home through mountains painted gold by sunset, Larkin and Thea were quiet. "Was it worth it?" Thea finally asked. "Everything we went through?" Larkin didn't answer right away. He thought about the threats, the fear, the loss of privacy, the stress that had aged them both. But he also thought about that woman's face when she received acknowledgement after decades of being dismissed. Thought about the town coming back to life. Thought about justice, slow and imperfect, but real. "Yes," he said, "it was worth it." Thea nodded. "I think so too." They were quiet another moment. Then Thea laughed. "What?" Larkin asked. "I was just thinking. We had a chance at $300 million. And what do we have to show for it? Medical bills we still can't pay, a house that still needs a new roof, and a car with 200,000 miles on it." Larkin laughed too. "Don't forget the federal agents who follow us everywhere." "Oh, right, and the death threats. And everyone in America knowing our business." They laughed together, the kind of laughter that comes when you've survived something difficult and can finally see the absurdity in it. "Worth it, though," Thea said. "Worth it," Larkin agreed. "Because some things can't be measured in money, integrity, justice, standing up when it would have been easier to walk away. Those things had value that no vault could hold." And as they pulled into their driveway, past the federal agent who nodded at them, past reporters who'd given up and gone home, past neighbors who waved with genuine respect, Larkin and Thea knew they'd made the right choice. They'd found a fortune. But what they'd discovered about themselves, about their community, about what ordinary people could do when they chose courage over comfort, that was the real treasure. And no one could take that away. The headline appeared on every major news outlet within hours of the first settlement announcement. Mountain Ridge Vault, $310 million cover-up finally comes to light. But the story had evolved beyond just the money. It had become something larger, a referendum on accountability, on the power of ordinary people, on what happens when someone finally says enough. Larkin and Thea's faces were everywhere, Not because they wanted to be, but because their story represented something people desperately needed to believe in, that doing the right thing still mattered. That one couple, armed with nothing but integrity, could stand against powerful interests and survive. But survival came with a cost. The morning after the settlement announcement, Larkin suffered a minor heart episode. Nothing catastrophic, the doctors said, just stress-induced arrhythmia. They kept him overnight for observation. Thea sat beside his hospital bed, holding his hand, watching monitors beep and lines trace across screens. "We should have taken the money and disappeared," she whispered. "Look what this is doing to you." Larkin squeezed her hand. "I'm 73 years old. My heart's been acting up for years. This isn't about the vault." "Yes, it is. The stress, the threats, the constant pressure. You're not sleeping, neither am I. Violet's worried sick. The twins keep asking if we're safe." "Are you saying you regret it?" Thea was quiet for a long time. Outside the hospital window, the city moved at its normal pace. People going to work, living their lives, unaware that two elderly people from a dying mountain town had just upended a 40-year conspiracy. "No," she said finally, "I don't regret it. But I'm tired, Larkin. So tired." "Me too." Violet arrived an hour later with coffee and worry etched across her face. "Dad, you scared us." "I'm fine. Doctors are being overly cautious. You're 73 with a heart condition, and you've been under enormous stress for months. They're not being cautious enough." She turned to Thea. "Mom, you both need to step back. Let the lawyers and officials handle everything else. You've done your part." "She's right," Grace said, entering the room. She'd come as soon as she heard. "You two need to rest. The legal process will take years. The criminal investigations are ongoing. But your testimony is recorded, your evidence is secured. You don't have to be the face of this anymore." Larkin looked at Thea. 48 years of marriage meant he could read her expression like his own thoughts. She was exhausted, scared, but also determined. "What happens to the victims if we step back?" Thea asked. "If we stop speaking out, will people stop caring?" Grace sat in the chair by the bed. "The momentum is there now. Victim advocacy groups are organized. Congressional hearings are scheduled. The story has legs beyond you two. You've lit the fire. It'll keep burning without you feeding it constantly." "But," Larkin prompted. He heard the hesitation in her voice. "But your presence matters. When you speak, people listen. You're credible in a way officials and lawyers aren't. You didn't have to come forward. You chose to. That resonates." "So we're trapped," Thea said. "Damned if we continue because the stress might kill us. Damned if we stop because the movement might lose momentum." "No," Grace said firmly. "You're free. Free to choose. That's the point. You've already done more than anyone had the right to expect. If you want to walk away now, do it. No one will blame you." Larkin was released the next day with strict instructions to reduce stress, take his medications, and rest. The doctors looked at him with sympathy, understanding that telling someone involved in a national scandal to reduce stress was like telling the ocean to stop making waves. At home, they unplugged the landline and turned off their cell phones. For 3 days, they existed in silence. No news, no calls, no updates. Just the two of them, moving through their small house, reading books, watching old movies, pretending the world outside didn't exist. On the 4th day, Margaret knocked. They'd given her a key for emergencies, and apparently this qualified. "I know you're hiding," she said, letting herself in. "But you need to see this." She had a laptop, showed them a video that had gone viral. A high school teacher in California had created a lesson plan around their story, taught students about ethics, civic responsibility, standing up to power. The video showed teenagers, diverse and engaged, debating whether they would have reported the vault or kept the money. 90% said they'd keep it, the teacher explained in the video. But after we studied your case, after they understood the context, the victims, the consequences, that number dropped to 40%. You're teaching a generation about integrity. That matters. Then Margaret showed them another video, a support group for families affected by government experimentation programs. People who'd felt isolated and ignored for decades. They'd found each other because of the Mountain Ridge story, were organizing, sharing resources, supporting each other. "You gave us a voice," one woman said in the video, tears streaming. "For the first time in 50 years, people believe us." Larkin and Thea watched in silence. When the videos ended, they sat together on their couch, holding hands. "We can't walk away," Thea said quietly. "Can we?" "No," Larkin agreed. "But we can be smarter about it, set boundaries, protect our health." They turned their phones back on. The messages were overwhelming. Interview requests from every major network, speaking invitations, book deals, movie offers. It was absurd and intrusive and exactly what they'd feared. But mixed in were other messages. From teachers wanting to talk to their classes, from victim advocacy groups requesting their testimony at hearings, from researchers studying government accountability who needed their help understanding what they'd found. They started saying yes selectively. They'd speak at congressional hearings, they'd meet with victim groups, they'd help researchers. But they wouldn't do entertainment interviews or reality shows or anything that turned their choice into spectacle. "We're not celebrities," Larkin told one persistent producer. "We're just people who found something and reported it. That's the whole story." The congressional hearings were intense. Larkin and Thea sat at a long table, facing a panel of senators and representatives, cameras recording every word. They told their story again, patiently, answering questions that ranged from genuine inquiry to political grandstanding. One senator, a man known for his anti-government rhetoric, tried to paint them as heroes exposing big government corruption. Larkin shut that down. "This isn't about politics," he said firmly. "This is about people who were hurt and a system that failed them. Government, corporations, individuals. Lots of people made bad choices. We're just trying to help make it right." Another senator asked the question everyone wondered. "Do you regret not keeping any of the money? Even a small amount?" Larkin and Thea exchanged glances. They'd discussed this question privately many times. "Every day," Thea answered honestly. "We're not saints. We're broke. We struggle. We'd be lying if we said we never thought about how different our lives could be." "But," the senator prompted. "But we'd struggle even more living with ourselves if we'd taken it," Larkin finished. "Money comes and goes. Integrity is all you really have." The clip went viral, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. People were tired of performative morality. Larkin and Thea's simple human acknowledgement of temptation and choice resonated. Donations started coming in, small amounts from ordinary people, $5 here, $20 there. A GoFundMe appeared without their knowledge or permission. Someone in Whispering Ridge had started it, simply titled "Help the Castellanoses with Medical Bills." They were uncomfortable with it. "We didn't do this for money," Thea said, but Violet convinced them to accept it. "People want to help. Let them. You've given everyone something precious. Let them give something back." The fund raised $47,000, enough to cover Larkin's medical bills and fix the roof and put something aside for emergencies. It wasn't a fortune, but it was breathing room. Meanwhile, the legal battles intensified. The defense contractors who'd filed suit claiming proprietary information doubled down. They had armies of lawyers and unlimited resources, but they were fighting public opinion as much as legal precedent. Protests appeared outside their headquarters. Shareholders questioned executives at meetings. Customers threatened boycotts. The PR nightmare was costing them more than any settlement would. One by one, they began to fold. Settlements were reached, not admissions of guilt, their lawyers were careful about that, but agreements to contribute to victim compensation funds. 50 million here, 30 million there. The numbers added up. The federal government fought harder. They had sovereign immunity, national security concerns, classification protocols. Their lawyers filed motion after motion to seal evidence, dismiss cases, delay proceedings, but Grace and her team were relentless. They'd assembled a coalition of prosecutors, former government officials, and legal scholars. They argued that the vault's very existence proved systematic wrongdoing. That classification couldn't be used to hide crimes. That victims had rights regardless of national security concerns. The case wound through courts for months, appeals, counter-appeals, emergency motions. Larkin and Thayer followed it as best they could, but the legal complexity was overwhelming. Then a breakthrough. A federal judge, appointed 30 years ago and nearing retirement, ruled that the government had to release all non-classified documents from the vault, and if they claimed something was classified, they had to prove current national security concerns, not just bureaucratic habit. "This is huge," Grace told them over the phone. "He's basically saying they can't hide behind classification anymore. They have to justify every redaction." The government appealed, but the ruling stood. Slowly, more documents became public. The full scope of the facility's programs emerged. The experiments, the cover-ups, the knowing harm. Public outrage reached a tipping point. Congressional representatives who'd been defending the government's position suddenly found themselves on the wrong side of voter sentiment. Election season was approaching, and no one wanted to be known as the person who protected a cover-up. Legislation was fast-tracked. The Mountain Ridge Accountability and Compensation Act. It established a permanent fund for victims, created an oversight board, mandated transparency for similar programs, and provided $310 million from the vault as initial funding. The bill passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. Politicians who agreed on nothing else agreed that this wrong needed to be righted. Larkin and Thayer were invited to the signing ceremony. They almost didn't go. The idea of standing in the White House being used for a photo opportunity felt wrong, but the victim advocacy groups convinced them. "Your presence says this is about real people, not politics. Come for us." So they went, stood in the Oval Office while the president signed the legislation. Cameras flashed. Politicians smiled. And Larkin and Thayer thought about Martin Reeves, the facility director who'd left his journal in the vault, hoping someone would someday care. Someone had, and it had mattered. The settlement process took 18 months. Claims had to be verified, damages assessed, distributions calculated. It was bureaucratic and slow and frustrating. But it was happening. The first checks went out on a Tuesday morning in October, 2 years after Larkin and Thayer had first opened that hidden door. The amounts varied. Some victims received a few $1,000s. Others, whose suffering had been documented and severe, received millions. It wasn't enough. No amount of money could undo what had been done. But it was acknowledgement, official recognition that they'd been harmed, that it mattered, that they weren't forgotten. A memorial service was held at the facility. It had been cleaned up, secured, partially restored. The vault room itself was now a museum exhibit, sealed behind glass, preserved exactly as it had been found. Over 300 people attended. Victims who'd survived, family members of those who hadn't, facility workers who'd witnessed things they'd been forced to stay quiet about, all of them finally able to speak. One by one, people stood and shared. Stories of loss, stories of survival, stories of waiting decades for this moment. Richard Morse, the security guard who'd spoken at the town hall, stood with a photo of a young man. "This is Tommy Caldwell. He was 22 when he volunteered for a study in 1970. They told him it was safe. It wasn't. He died 6 months later. I worked security that night. I heard the alarms, saw them wheel him out, and I never said anything because I was scared. I'm sorry, Tommy. I'm sorry it took 54 years for the truth to come out, but it's out now because 2 people had courage I didn't." He looked directly at Larkin and Thea. "Thank you." The ceremony ended with the unveiling of a memorial wall. Black granite, like the Vietnam Memorial, inscribed with names. Every verified victim of the facility's programs. 87 names, 87 lives, 87 families forever changed. Larkin ran his fingers across the carved letters. These weren't just names. They were people who'd trusted their government, who'd believed they were helping their country, who'd paid with their health and lives. "We did this for them," he whispered to Thea. "All of it was for them." She nodded, unable to speak through tears. The final settlement numbers were staggering. After all claims were processed, after lawyers and administrators were paid, after the memorial and museum were funded, there was money left over. $63 million. The compensation board had to decide what to do with it. The legislation allowed for discretionary spending on affected communities. Whispering Ridge certainly qualified. A proposal was drafted: economic development grants, infrastructure improvements, educational programs, healthcare facility upgrades, a comprehensive plan to revitalize a town that had been dying since the facility closed. But there was a catch. The board wanted to include Larkin and Thea in the distribution. A finder's fee, they called it. 10%. $6.3 million. "Absolutely not," Larkin said when Grace told them. "We didn't do this for money." "I know, but legally you're entitled to compensation as discoverers, and frankly you've earned it. The stress, the threats, the upheaval of your lives. $6 million is not unreasonable." "No. Larkin, Thea, listen to me. You're 75 and 73 years old. You're still in debt. Violet is struggling. Your grandchildren need college money. This isn't greed. This is accepting fair compensation for what you've sacrificed." They discussed it privately for days. The temptation was intense. $6 million. They could help Violet, secure their own future, live comfortably, travel, all the things they'd never been able to afford. But something about it felt wrong. Taking money from a fund meant for victims and community rebuilding. Even if it was legal, even if it was offered freely, it felt like betraying the principle that had guided them from the beginning. "What if we accept it?" Thea suggested, "but immediately donate most of it. Keep enough to be secure, give the rest to causes that matter." Larkin considered this. How much is enough? They did the math. Pay off medical debts, fix the house, reliable car, modest emergency fund, help Violet with college for the twins, maybe a small vacation, the first real one in decades. 300,000, Thea calculated. That would change our lives without being excessive. And the other 6 million? Scholarship funds, medical research, victim advocacy, the community rebuilding, places it'll actually help. They presented the compromise to Grace. She smiled. "You two are relentlessly consistent. You know that?" "Is that bad?" "No, it's remarkable, and yes, we can structure it that way." The announcement was made quietly. Larkin and Thea Castellanos accepted $300,000 in compensation. The remaining $6 million was donated to various causes, with the bulk going to the Whispering Ridge Community Development Fund. Even that felt like too much attention. But the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. People understood. They'd stood on principle, but they weren't martyrs. They'd taken what they needed and given away what they didn't. "Still less than 1% of what they could have had," one commentator noted. "And they're donating 95% of what they accepted. That's integrity." With their share, they did exactly what they'd planned: paid off debt, fixed the roof, bought a certified pre-owned Honda Accord with 40,000 miles, helped Violet with tuition deposits, and took a week-long trip to see the ocean, something Thea had always wanted to do. They stood on a beach in Oregon, cold wind whipping their hair, watching waves crash against rocks. Neither of them spoke for a long time. "Worth it?" Larkin finally asked. Thea squeezed his hand. "Every single moment." Whispering Ridge transformed over the next 2 years. The Community Development Fund brought jobs, infrastructure, hope. Young families moved in, businesses opened, the school expanded. The town that had been dying found new life. The facility became the Mountain Ridge Memorial and Education Center. School groups toured it. Researchers studied it. It became a destination for people interested in government accountability and civil rights history. Larkin and Thea were offered positions as museum advisors, paid positions. They accepted, working a few hours a week, giving tours, sharing their story, helping visitors understand what had happened and why it mattered. One afternoon, a teacher brought a group of high school students. They were studying ethics and civic responsibility. Larkin walked them through the facility, ending at the vault exhibit. "So you really walked away from all that money?" a girl asked, staring at the display of cash behind glass. "We didn't walk away from it," Larkin corrected gently. "We made sure it went where it was supposed to go." "But weren't you tempted?" "Every day. Still am sometimes. Temptation doesn't make you bad. What you do with it defines you." A boy raised his hand. "My dad says you're idiots. Says anyone who doesn't take free money is a fool." Larkin smiled. "Your dad might be right. We could have been comfortable, secure, never worried about money again. But we'd have had to live with knowing we took something from people who'd already lost so much, and for us that price was too high." "So you're saying morality matters more than money?" another student asked. "I'm saying you have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror. You have to be able to tell your grandchildren what you did and feel proud instead of ashamed. Money can't buy that." The teacher thanked them afterward. "You have no idea how powerful this is for them, seeing real people who made a hard choice and stuck with it. They need that example." Violet's twins graduated college 4 years after the vault's discovery. They both wrote about their grandparents in their application essays. Both mentioned integrity, sacrifice, and doing right, even when it costs everything. At graduation, they thanked Larkin and Thea publicly. "Our grandparents taught us that character isn't what you do when people are watching. It's what you do when no one would ever know. They had a choice between wealth and integrity. They chose integrity, and they showed us that's not a sacrifice. It's a victory." Larkin cried. Thea cried. Violet cried. Even the stoic Margaret, who'd come with them, wiped her eyes. The story continued to ripple outward. Similar cases at other facilities were investigated. More victims came forward. More cover-ups were exposed. The Mountain Ridge case became a precedent, a proof that citizens could challenge power and win. 5 years after finding the vault, Larkin and Thea received an award from a national civil rights organization. They almost didn't go. Awards felt strange, like celebrating something that had simply been the right thing to do. But they went. And when they were introduced, when thousands of people stood and applauded, when they saw faces in the crowd, victim families they'd met, advocates they'd worked with, ordinary people who'd been inspired by their choice, they finally understood. It wasn't about them. It had never been about them. They were symbols of something people desperately needed to believe, that ordinary citizens could stand against overwhelming power and not just survive, but prevail. Larkin's speech was brief. "My wife and I aren't heroes. We're mechanics of integrity, if that makes sense. We saw something broken and tried to fix it, not with tools but with truth. Anyone can do what we did. You just have to care more about what's right than what's easy." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. On their 50th wedding anniversary, Violet threw them a party. The whole town came. Federal agents who'd protected them, lawyers who'd fought alongside them, victims who'd received justice, neighbors who'd supported them. All gathered in the community center to celebrate not just a marriage, but what that marriage represented. Estelle, the mayor, presented them with a key to the city. "This is traditionally ceremonial," she said, "but in your case it's literal. You unlocked something in this town. Hope, possibility, the belief that we matter. Thank you." Merritt gave a toast. I've been a journalist for 44 years. I've covered wars, scandals, triumphs, and tragedies. But I've never seen anything like what these two did. They had a chance at fortune and chose family, justice, community, integrity instead. They remind us that heroism isn't loud, it's quiet, it's consistent. It's two people holding hands and saying, "This is wrong, and we're going to make it right." To Larkin and Thea, may we all have their courage. Glasses raised, cameras flashed, and in the center of it all, Larkin and Thea sat together, overwhelmed and embarrassed and grateful. Later, alone on their porch, watching stars emerge above the mountain, they reflected on how far they'd come. "Remember when we were just trying to pay medical bills?" Thea asked. "Remember when our biggest problem was a dying furnace?" They laughed. Those problems hadn't gone away entirely. They still had to budget carefully, still worried about money. But the crushing weight of debt was gone, and more importantly, they discovered something about themselves. "We were strong," Thea said quietly. "Stronger than we knew. We still are." "You think we'd do it again, knowing everything that happened? The stress, the threats, everything?" Larkin didn't hesitate. "Yes, because look what happened. Real justice, real change, a town reborn. Would I trade that to have been comfortable but complicit? Never." 7 years after finding the vault, the final victim claim was processed. The compensation fund had distributed over $400 million, counting settlements from corporations and government allocations. Every verified victim or family member had received something. The memorial was complete, the education center thriving, the legislative changes permanent. Grace invited Larkin and Thea to a private ceremony at the facility, just the three of them and a handful of victim representatives. "We're closing the case officially," she explained. "Every claim processed, every available avenue of justice pursued. It's done." They stood in the vault room, now a museum exhibit. The pallets of cash were gone, distributed to their intended recipients. The gold bars donated to the memorial fund. The documents archived for researchers. What remained was an empty room with clean floors and soft lighting. Peaceful. No longer a tomb of secrets, but a monument to truth. "You started something you couldn't finish alone," Grace said. "But you started it. And that made all the difference." One of the victim representatives, a woman whose father had died in the experiments, approached Larkin and Thea. "My dad's name is on the memorial wall. When I was young, people told me he died in an accident. Later I learned the truth, but no one would acknowledge it. For 40 years, his death was invisible. Because of you, he's remembered. He matters. Thank you doesn't begin to cover what I feel, but thank you." She handed them a photo. A young man in his 20s, smiling, full of life. "That's Dad before the experiments. I want you to have it. So you remember him. Remember all of them." Larkin took the photo with trembling hands. 87 names on that wall. 87 lives. And now he held one of their faces. "We'll remember," he promised. "Always." As they left the facility that day, Larkin paused at the entrance, looked back at the massive concrete structure that had dominated the mountain for over 60 years. "You know what I realized?" he said to Thea. "We could have been anyone, any couple, any person exploring that facility could have found the vault. We just happened to be the ones who did, and we happened to make the choice we made." "You think someone else would have done differently?" "Maybe, probably, we'll never know. But I'm glad it was us. Glad we got to be part of something that mattered." They drove home through mountains painted gold by autumn sun. The Civic had been replaced by the Accord, but the road was the same. The town was different, though, alive, thriving, full of families and hope. Their house looked small as they pulled in, but it was theirs, roof fixed, foundation solid, not a mansion, but home. Margaret waved from her porch. "Dinner at my place tonight. I made pot roast." "We'll be there," Thea called back. Inside, they found a letter waiting. It was from the high school, asking if they'd speak at graduation. "Our students need to hear from people who've lived lives of integrity," the principal wrote. "You embody what we hope to teach." Larkin looked at Thea. 78 and 76 now. Still active, still healthy, still together. "Should we?" he asked. "Yes. If we can help even one student understand that character matters, it's worth it." That evening at Margaret's, surrounded by neighbors who'd become family, Larkin raised his glass. "To second chances," he said. "To justice, to community, and to never underestimating what ordinary people can do when they choose courage over comfort." "To Larkin and Thea," Margaret added, "who reminded us all what it means to be human." They ate and laughed and told stories. The federal agents were gone now, no longer needed. The threats had stopped. The media had moved on. Life had returned to something resembling normal. Except it wasn't normal. It was better, richer, not in money, but in meaning. Later, in bed, Thea whispered into the darkness, "Larkin, are you awake?" "Yes." "Do you ever wonder what our lives would have been like if we'd never gone to that facility?" "Sometimes. Probably quieter, definitely more boring. We'd have died unknown, just another elderly couple in a dying town. And now? Now our story might outlive us, might inspire people we'll never meet, might change things we'll never see. That's not nothing." "No," Larkin agreed. "That's everything. Anyone can change the world if they're brave enough to choose right over easy, truth over silence, and justice over wealth. Because at the end of the day, the greatest fortune isn't what you keep. It's what you give away when no one's watching." As morning light crept through the bedroom curtains of their small house, Larkin and Thea woke to another day. Not as discoverers of a vault, not as heroes in a national story, but as what they'd always been. Two people who loved each other and tried to do right by the world. They'd found $310 million buried beneath a mountain. But what they'd really discovered was far more valuable. They'd found proof that integrity still mattered. That ordinary people could stand against power and win. That justice delayed isn't justice denied if someone's willing to fight for it. The girl who'd once struggled to pay medical bills was now secure. The man who'd spent his life working with his hands had used them to build something that would outlast any engine he'd ever fixed. A legacy of courage. Whispering Ridge thrived around them. Children played in parks funded by the settlement. Families worked in businesses supported by the development fund. Students learned in schools that taught about accountability and ethics, using the facility as a living classroom. And every single person in that town knew who'd made it possible. Not the lawyers or politicians or officials. Two elderly people with grease-stained hands and spotless hearts who'd looked at a fortune and said, "This isn't ours." The mechanic and the teacher had rebuilt more than engines and young minds. They'd rebuilt hope itself. Because for Larkin and Thea Castellanos, and for everyone whose lives they'd touched, the real treasure was never in the vault. It was in the choice they made when they found it. It was in standing up when everyone else would have walked away. It was in believing that doing right mattered more than being rich. And that choice, that simple act of integrity, had changed everything. The end. Up next, two more incredible stories of courage and consequence. Click to keep discovering what happens when ordinary people make extraordinary choices. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe integrity is worth more than gold and that one choice can change not just a life but a legacy.